Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. Nobody likes to get a traffic ticket, to get that summons, whether it's left on your windshield or whether it's handed to you, but it's done with an eye, for the most part, on safety. Now we're going to take this layers deeper when it comes to the transportation industry, specifically trucking. There are penalties, and the penalties are increasing. We're going to look at that with the eyes of safety, and he has made it his life's work to make sure that these trucking companies are operating as safe as possible. He works with them, offers suggestions, consults. He's got his team all over the country and even out of the country, because we've talked with him before, where he actually goes to the manufacturing of some of these cargo tankers. DOT Training Solutions is his company. He's the president and founder. Matt Freeman is back with us. Hey, Matt, how you doing today?
Hey, doing well, Steve. Hey, thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure and a lot of fun having our good conversations that we can get out to the people. So
same, and learn so much. And I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. We take it for granted what's happening on the roads. These massive sized trucks, I mean, 80,000 pounds barreling down the road, and more certainly with things like Amazon. There's more vehicles out there making deliveries. There's got to be some accountability when it comes to the safety, and that's where you come in. And what we're learning here today is the penalties, the fines for violations on these vehicles. Like anything else, they're going up, right?
yeah, every so often, legislature gets together, the agencies get together, and then they come up with more penalties. Let me rephrase it. They change up, where they increase penalties in some of the areas. Back in November 2024, which took effect in December 30th of 2024, was new penalties. They raised them to where they were. So, we've talked a lot about safety and inspections and compliance reviews, investigations that state and federal partners when they go in and do these investigations on these companies and what they're looking for. And, from the office side of things to the driver and then the vehicle side of things. So there's so much there. Now, one thing we hadn't really talked about is depending on the violations that are found, there are penalties. It may be assessed. Each investigation is differently. You might have two trucking companies sitting next to side by side, who transport everyday goods, right? But depending on what violations are discovered in each one, could be different. When the neighbor trucking company may have none, and then you go to the one that's getting investigated is the one next door, and you find out they have all kinds of things wrong. From driver violations to in-house violations where the files aren't in right order, driver qualifications are missing things, certain things are required. They're not doing drug and alcohol testing like it's supposed to be done. There's a lot of things that go into the penalties, and in the regulations you have your critical and acute violations, which are the ones that typically will end up in a penalty. There's other things that cause penalties depending on what's going on in the hazmat world. You have your serious violations, but just kind of give you an idea. Some of the ones I've just kind of stuck out here to me. Out of service orders, operating commercial motor vehicles and equipment that has been placed out of service. So basically, my example would be a truck's been placed out of service and it's still being driven. Okay. That penalty went from $2,304 to $2,364 when found. So it's a small increase, but it's still an increase. Every little, when you're a driver or a company, every penny counts. And even if it's a few dollars or several $1,000s, what some of these penalties can get into.
I would think even on the back end, and I want to hear some more of the penalties in a sec, but first thing I'm thinking here too is that it's, as I've learned from you, it's public knowledge when violations are assessed. And is it pretty much everything public knowledge when a violation is placed on a trucking vehicle?
Well, it depends on some of the things. But yes, to answer your question, yes.
Mm.
You can look up a company through the Safer system, and you can pull up DOT Training Solutions or Steve's Trucking Company. And if it's a legit company, you can look at it and see what the rating is that they have. You can also go in there and see a generic view of what violations have been given. So if a driver has been placed out of service, you can see that that vehicle has been placed out of service or what violations they've gotten. Okay. So a lot of companies, they'll go in, and if they're hiring a for-hire carrier, like someone to come transport your goods or my goods to go someplace, I'm going to look and say, hey, what kind of driver or company am I getting? What's the driver rating, or I'm sorry, what's the company rating? They got a good rating. Well, hey, I want to give them a shot. And so
Mm.
the most things are public knowledge. Now, whenever there's cases and penalties and things like that that have been closed, there are places in the FMCSA website that you can go to and find and see those. There's You just got to know what to look for. So yeah, it is public knowledge to answer your
Wow.
question on a lot of stuff.
Well, I would imagine too, since it is public knowledge, I'm looking to hire the ABC trucking company. I've heard, yeah, they're pretty good. The rates are really good. Let's take a look here. Go to the Safer website. Now you drill down. Wow, they got nailed on that. I got another violation there, another violation there. I don't think we should hire him. Yeah, let's go to another one. That's going to cost them money right there.
Absolutely. That costs them money. Insurance rates go up. There's a whole
Thank you.
there's a
Matt, I forgot about
Yeah.
that.
There's
Yeah.
we had a good conversation on that one a while back. But so there's a lot of things that, because and what I do and what my company and my folks do is, it's our job to make sure that these companies aren't getting these violations and these penalties assessed, because you know it causes a whole lot of damage, more ways than one. Even that small penalty can sometimes trickle, depending how many times they're being visited for the same thing, can go up. Um,
Hmm.
you know, just to kind of give you an idea, let's see. I'm just trying to pick some common ones here that I've seen here that stand out. Record keeping requirements, maximum penalty per day went from $1,544 to $1,584. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it's enough. So if you have enough uh, violations in those areas, those add up.
Well, now
So
it's on radar. Now it's like,
mhm.
oh, the ABC trucking company, they're not really good at keeping records. Are they hiding something? Hmm.
Well, and what happens is, so the breakdown, what they're going to see on these companies. So there's an average that comes out, and they show you what areas where all the penalties are refined. So when it comes to pinpointing those certain companies on the in-house violations, what I call them, they might not see that. Okay, but on the safer side, they're going to pull the company up and see all the driver side, everything, every roadside inspection gets uploaded into that system. So they're going to see all that stuff. What they're going to see on the company side is the rating side. What the rating is. You have a satisfactory, a conditional, and unsat rating, right? Everybody wants to have that satisfactory. If you're conditional or unsat, well, then we know there's been some issues. Okay. Um, and that's where that is when you're monitoring those. Like, hey, who's going to drive for me today, or who am I going to hire? That's where that really takes effect. Uh, some of the big ones that are out there, and they've increased this one quite a bit. Knowing falsification of records went from 15,000 to 440, from $15,445 to $15,846. So those are
I
max,
don't think it's high enough.
right? So
I
so
mean,
that
come
that
on.
that's yeah, that's knowing a falsification of records. And I've been in my past in the companies where records have been falsified, and it was knowing. Yeah, you got to prove that. But yeah,
Yeah.
you know, obviously, from years ago when I was doing it to today, penalties are a lot higher. They increase every so often. I can remember when $86,000 for a penalty was the max given at one time. Now it's gone up. So It just depends what you're looking at.
Mm.
Let's see here. Commercial driver's license CDL violations went from $6,974 to
Oh,
$7,155. Common
wow.
stuff you see.
So let's look at that for a moment. That was it sounded like it was the license of the trucker, the driver,
Hmm.
some situation there.
Hmm.
So that violation takes place. Is he on the hook for that, or it's all the trucking company? They're all that's their responsibility. How does it trickle down, or does it trickle down to the driver?
No, it can trickle down to the driver. So there, I've written a multitude of driver cases in my past. Um, so a lot of times drivers have the mentality, not all, but some have had the mentality that they work for the company. So what I do is not going to affect me. Okay. So whenever you got a driver out there who's disobeying the um, hours of service violations or regulations, okay, they don't want to follow them. All right. There's certain criteria that if a company has a policy in place and these drivers know that they shouldn't have done it, okay, and are breaking the law anyway, now there's a chance there that the company can get the violation, but guess who gets the penalty?
Mm.
The driver. So there are cases to where, and this is a little small example, there are cases where drivers do get penalties too. Um, you know,
Wow.
the penalties I've had assessed for drivers have been up and down. I haven't seen them as severe, ever seen one as severe as like a large trucking company or motor carrier get one, in the thousands. But I've seen drivers get one for a few $1,000s. You know, that's a lot of money on a driver.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And his
it-
reputation as well, because I'm sure that's going to carry, let's say he was negligent. He didn't, update his license, whatever it might be. Yeah. There are accidents that happen, but
sure.
that's your livelihood. And let's say it's a violation with your license. Well, okay. I'm going to call him. I'm going to hire Josh. I think I'm going to hire Josh. He's unemployed now. He last worked at the ABC trucking company. What am I going to do? I'm going to call them.
Yeah.
What do you think about Josh? Well, he's a good guy, but doesn't keep up to date on his records, doesn't do this, doesn't do that. And right there, the kiss of death if you're trying to get a job.
Mhm. Especially if you're an owner operator. You're a
Mm,
for hire carrier, and you're looking for hire work. Um, and these companies who have a lot of drivers that are their employees, there's a lot of record keeping stuff we've talked about in the past that they have to keep up with that. And, uh, I believe in that trickle effect. You got to keep good records. If you don't,
mm,
that's when things happen. Um, you got to have good policies in place. You got to have criteria that the drivers understand. They have to sign off on that. You got to be everything you tell these drivers to do with the drivers, just like your employees. You have to make sure that they understand and they are aware and they, somehow sign off on that information because otherwise, if every pond has a bad duck, it just happens. And, you go into companies, there might be that one particular driver, he just keeps messing it up for everybody. And, sometimes that driver's the one that gets looked at, you know, and, does it take anything off the company whenever a driver gets a penalty or a case against him? No, they
mm.
don't. Because those penalties are still seen, or those violations are still seen, on those reports. Now, just to kind of give an idea of something here, and this is the summary of closed enforcement cases for the last looks like 7 years here. I thought this was very interesting. Okay, we talk about the everyday motor carrier. All right, so in 2019, there was 3,647 closed cases. Out of that, there was $24 million in penalties settled. You go to, let's see, so that was 2019. Let's skip a couple of years here. So let's go to 2021. You had 2,328 cases settled with $15 million in penalties. Okay. So the way I look at that is there's a few million DOT numbers out there. Okay. Every trucking company, motor carrier, has to have a DOT number. from your maintenance facilities to your trucking companies to anyone who's deemed by the federal regulations to have a DOT number. So you have your state who comes in, and state investigators, enforcement, they do cases. That's a state case. Okay. Lots of those done. And then you have so many states that do federal cases. Okay. So when there's issues, and then you have a handful of federal agents that are out there with FMCSA who do enforcement. So out of all this, these are the numbers that they're coming up with out of all these companies that are out there. So let's see here. So let's just look at 2024. We had 3,796 cases that were closed. Okay, so far that is the highest number of cases seen. This was 2024. $26,310,842 in penalties were settled. Just on motor carriers alone, 2024. Here's a shocker. Right now this is closed out up until, I believe it looks like January. Don't quote me on that, but okay, let's put it this way. So far this year, they've closed 1,062 cases on motor carriers, trucking companies. $7,331,116 in penalties settled already. We just started the year.
Wow.
So right now, the enforcement side, they're not messing around. They want to make sure people are being safe. If they're not being safe and they're not taking things seriously, this is what can happen. They're there to do a job, and they want to be safe. And it's my job to make sure that my customers are being safe. I've been very lucky to have 100% success rate. So when FMCSA does come in, they haven't found anything that's going to severely hurt them. We don't want them to get the major penalties. We want to make sure that we're finding everything. Will a good investigator find something? Sure, they will, and they will. It's very rare in my lifetime that I ever had a clean company. You always found. It seemed like we always found something. But
you minimize you working with a company, minimize the chances of that. And I look at what you do now, seeing this, and we talk about violations and this aspect of it. It's almost as if your safety insurance for them to ensure that they are complying, but also, when a violation comes up, it's going to be minimal. Yeah, like you said, you look into anything, you'll find something. But in these situations, you want to find as little as possible to minimize the risk of any kind of safety situation, but certainly policy violation.
Yeah, it's our job to make sure we go into our customers to find everything we can. We don't just dig a little hole. We keep digging till we can't get nowhere else. Because we want to be able to find the things. Because if FMCSA or the state enforcement DOT is going to be in there, they're going to do the same. Yeah. So I'd rather us make sure that if they're doing something wrong, that we start correcting it. You can't change your past. Hey, if the DOT comes in, they look at this, that's in the past. But there's also moving forward the way we look at things. There's reactive and being proactive. There's also sample periods. The DOT comes in. They can only go back so far for certain documents. Mm-hmm. So if they have messed up, okay, but when we're there, we find things that with deficiencies, we want to make sure that they correct those. And that way, as they're moving forward, the DOT, it's not a matter if, it's when they show up, that you've already made those corrections moving forward. And that's been a big guidance, because a lot of times, your enforcement agencies want to see that you actually tried and you actually care. They want to see that you hire someone to help them move forward. Hey, I made some mistakes here. And when they're looking at their safety management system, they're going to see that fluctuation on where your bad points were. Okay. Because of all the stops, you had a lot of stops here. You slowed down. What are the violations? So they're going to look at a pattern. And we do the same thing. Most of my personnel are retired or prior enforcement.
Sure.
The other side of it is all industry staff that we do training with. So we have different aspects of how we look at things, and when we go in there, we take it serious. We kind of turn our old hat back on and pretend, we're that guy again and find his stuff. And then when we're done, we take the hat back off and say, hey, here's the recommendations.
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah, I want to share. We haven't talked about that in a long time, but you were on the other side of the fence. You were the inspector. You were the one writing up the violations for truckers. And now you're on the other side, or trucking companies. You're on the other side now, ensuring that they're complying as much as possible in the field. Does anything stand out for you as just the most unusual safety violation, or just something that was big that you just couldn't believe that a company overlooked it? I'm not talking about your clients. I'm talking about, again, when you were out in the field performing that job.
There's one thing that I'll never forget that stuck out to me. Years ago, had a company. I'm not going to say. We'll just keep it that way. I had a company I was doing an investigation on, and they had been in trouble. They'd already had 3 fatalities in their fleet.
Wow.
Then they were in trouble again. They hadn't been shut down yet. We went in with an imminent hazard after I was done with them, which would shut them down for a lot of reasons. Okay. But the one thing that stood out to me, pulling on that parking lot, looking at the equipment, it was so bad looking at it. Everything stood out. It was that obvious that they did not care. And that one stands out the most. One of them, with the investigation, we end up, they were shut down not too long after that. But it took 2 fatalities to get their attention and make things really happen. So
painful.
It was a bad deal.
Obvious. It was blatant disregard.
Yeah, it literally, when you looked at the equipment, the trailers, the trucks, you could just tell they were in bad shape. And it's that word. How's that go? That phrase? It's the obvious. It was the obvious. And but now obviously, we did our job. I did my job. Went in, inspected everything, looked at all the files, and did my investigation I was supposed to do. And that's the turnout was they were no longer in business not too long after we finished everything. So
wow, rightfully so. Wow. Thanks for sharing everything today. The insight here is, again, we take it for granted of what's going on in the back end. And how important this is to make sure that these companies comply. And that's where you come in. DOT trainingsolutions.com is your website. And if anybody is involved in the trucking industry, they could just reach out to you, call it a discovery call. Just kind of feel things out.
That's what it is. It's a discovery call.
Excellent. Matt, thank you so much for being here again today.
All right. Hey, thank you, Steve. Have a good one.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.